Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm Michael Koenigs, and I'm delighted to have a conversation with three people who believe we need to act now and we need to act big on climate change. They are actor-environmentalist Adrian Grenier, as well as Jamie Margolin and Anna Buretta. They're some of the leading voices among young activists. And Adrian, I'd love to start with you. You've been committed to this cause for so long, and it seems like there's an urgent year right now as we see the flooding in New York, the hurricanes down in Louisiana, wildfires. Why is this such a moment?
Well, first of all, I'm just excited that I'm a young activist. That's a compliment. Thank you. Well, I was going to say before, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, and when's the second best time right now? So I think it's important that we all put our life force into making the world in a vision that is compatible with our hearts. And so I'm really excited that us young people are out there making positive changes. I actually would push back a little bit on the urgency. I think things done in duress or stress actually can corrupt your intention and how you actually accomplish the goal. So I take a step back before I act. I breathe, I meditate, and I come to a decision before I act calmly and very meaningfully and mindfully.
Thinking too about how young people have come out and started to act. I feel like in some ways, Jamie and Anna, some of the youngest voices have become the loudest in recent years. Jamie, talk about your work doing 0 Hour and how you view these young voices as such a crucial part of the dialogue that's taking place now.
I've been a climate justice organizer since I was 14 and I'm 19 years old now. So from freshman year in high school to my sophomore year in college. I founded 0 Hour after the extensive climate disasters of 2017 and after a year of doing so much mobilizing and organizing and fighting in my community in Seattle, just desperately trying to get some sort of action passed, but leaders weren't listening to me. No one was listening to myself or any of my other young peers who were pushing and fighting for climate justice. I joined a lawsuit with Our Children's Trust, suing the state of Washington for continuing to worsen the climate crisis and deny our generation our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by actively making the world unlivable. And that lawsuit is still going on. And a little bit after that, I posted on social media that I was going to start a youth climate march. I asked who's with me, and I got one response from a girl named Nadia Nazar in Baltimore. And then I brought in two other young people who I was at a summer camp with, and we co-founded the International Youth Climate Justice Movement 0 Hour. We had marches on July 21st in 2018, and soon after our marches, Greta Thunberg started striking. The school strike for climate movement blew up, and we started being one of the main organizers in some of the American strikes, as well as our chapters all over the world were organizing their own strikes. And there is a level of exhaustion where we've been marching and we've been advocating, and I've been at this since I was 14 and I'm 19 now, and there is a level of tiredness and burnout. And if you see like, oh, she looks a little tired, like if just looking at me, it's because I am. And it's exhausting continuing the fight throughout basically your whole teenagehood.
And one of those actions is coming up just around the corner, September 24th. Anna, talk about your work and that org.
So I am the one of the co-directors of the Strike Logistics chapter of Fridays for Future in New York City. And this strike is coming up on the 24th, so September 24th. The kind of theme of this strike is uproot the system, because we wanted to make sure that people were aware of the fact that our global leaders are not taking climate action in the way that they need to. And we need to hold them accountable for their inaction. And we need to demand that we, as Generation Z, as the next generation, that we have a right to a future. Because at this point, I don't see a future for myself, because the global leaders and President Biden and all these people are not being as aggressive as they need to be for climate legislation and for actual change. Another aspect of the strike is to highlight map of voices, the people most affected by the climate crisis. And these are the people whose homes have been destroyed, who have been living with the consequences of climate change for the past decade, not just now. And they're the ones who are most vulnerable, and they're the ones who often are ignored because they don't have connections, they're not rich, they come from the global south. They don't have the kind of platforms that global north activists have. In certain countries, if you're a climate activist, you can go to jail. It's not something that's celebrated, whereas in the United States, when I tell people that I'm a climate activist, they think that's really cool and they're super excited about it. It's a totally different mindset in different places of the world. And I think that's why we as activists in the global north and throughout the entire globe need to come together and make sure that every child has the right to a future, because at this point, it doesn't feel as if I am going to have a future that I deserve and that's livable.
Yeah, I feel that too. I mean, my family is from Colombia, South America, and Colombia is the deadliest place in the world to be an environmental activist. The murders of environmental activists have gone up, and the people on the front lines who are really the ones defending the biodiversity of our world are Indigenous people and Indigenous folks on the front lines, especially Indigenous women. We have to defend the defenders, and that people who are environmental activists in places like my family's home country of Colombia are highly at risk for being killed because of the work that they do.
And it is a staggering and global issue where there's certainly macro forces and governments at play. And Adrian, you've done an amazing job helping people to think too what they can do on their own personal level, and talk about your own personal journey. I mean, you've been doing this now for decades. So you had the early experience of the anger. Talk about how your views have evolved and what people can do on an individual level.
When I was younger, I was a lot more radical and certainly in a different phase of my environmental participation. I think it's true. This is a very complex issue. It's multifactorial. And so it's important that we continue to wrestle philosophically with what it is we're doing in the first place, because we don't want to get wrong. So these days I've been really focused on what I can do personally, just within my smaller community, the think globally, act locally philosophy. I got my permaculture certificate the other day, a couple months ago, and my teacher, he said, everyone's so focused on reducing their footprint, but we need to maximize our handprint, which means not everything has to be anti the world or the establishment or the status quo. There's a lot of destruction, no doubt about it. But I think we can start putting our focus in building a better system, creating new paradigms that actually will replace, because we have to be careful. If we dismantle this whole world, what are the consequences of that? What are the negative externalities of that? So while I do agree that, there's a lot of things that we need to address and focus on, be careful about the ego to think that we're going to do it all and that we have the single solution. We need as many solutions as there are people, all working to create small, localized farms, home gardens. And I think once we all have a garden in our backyard, then we can start to dismantle industrial agriculture.
And it is one of these things where people can take action. It's that they can get scared by the major forces, but on a day-to-day basis. So talk also about the Lonely Whale Foundation and what the meaning of that term kind of comes from.
For us, we were trying to address the 10 million tons of plastic that makes its way into the ocean. And we're like, well, how do you get your head around that? This is such a big behemoth problem. It almost... it's unrelatable when you get to numbers like that. And so we're like, so how do we reduce it to a single unit of measure that we can actually take action on? And we came up with the straw as being a microplastic, small piece of plastic that can represent the whole. And so let's start eliminating straws. And if we can do that, if we can simply just do that, and it hasn't been easy, then we can maybe attack the bigger problem. But it gives everybody something that they can do on a daily basis to actually make those changes. But, at the end of the day, we have a huge amount of plastic that's still making its way into the ocean. So if you can't do straws, how are you going to do that bigger problem?
I think that too much emphasis is put on the individual and individual action, and while straws, yes, there's that's plastic, and it's good to keep any sort of plastic out of the ocean. The people who are responsible for the vast majority of the pollution in the ocean is the fishing industry. It's these massive industries. 100 corporations are responsible for roughly 71% of all emissions. The vast majority of the people who feel the impacts of the climate crisis are not the ones who cause the climate crisis. Yes, it's great to be eco-friendly in our own lives. Do not get me wrong. I am not trashing on that. That is great. But the fossil fuel industry wants us to point fingers at each other and be like, the reason that we're in this, or the solution to this, is just like, you and I are going to stop using plastics and we'll be okay. And Shell will tweet things like, what are you doing for the earth? What are you, they want us to just be so focused on blowing out our own little matches that they're just torching the entire planet, causing the vast majority of all pollution. It's an infrastructure that we're in that, yes, we need to think about the world that we create. We can't just dismantle the system without having a new one in place. But there is a dismantling that does need to happen because Albert Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is trying to solve a problem with the same thinking that caused it. And we do not have time for small incremental changes. Right now, I'm in New York City, and in Union Square Park, there is a massive countdown clock that essentially says, according to the science, we have within the span of 6 years, we have to be at zero emissions. That's our deadline.
And with that kind of deadline, Adrian, there are companies out there, some of which are legitimately striving to make a change and provide new technological solutions that could lead to those kind of leaps. How do you kind of respond and think about the way in which companies have a role in this future?
Yeah, so a perfect example, at Lonely Whale, we started Next Wave Plastics, which is a consortium of now about 15 companies with an international footprint who've come together to create a supply chain for plastic that is essentially just left into the environment and on its way in close proximity to waterways in the ocean. And they've all come together to actually agree to buy this material and then use it in their business to some degree. So we're actually creating demand for that particular type of plastic. And a lot of time it's in developing countries where they don't have the infrastructure. I think we need to work with business to create better systems and recognize and appreciate the challenges that business have to face in order to actually stay in business and actually generate the products and the services that we as humans utilize. I mean, it sounds like a good idea to not use oil, for example, but the realities are a lot more complex.
I'm going to have to cut you off because it's not we can't, just physically, just for the climate, we have to stop using oil because the other option is complete planetary destruction. So we have to move fast.
I've been in this work for 20 years. And it was the same alarm going off then. And I know elders that I looked up to who were 40 years ago saying these things. So, and we're still here. So I would just say, I'm not convinced that we're all going to die in 6, 7, 8 years.
But I think in this group, we're all in agreement that this is a major issue and have devoted endless hours and years, in the case of Adrian, to understanding and trying to make a difference. And it is not something that necessarily immediately changes. However, during COVID, we saw a moment, a blip on the radar. So Anna, how are you and other folks thinking about the impact of both the economy and COVID as it impacts this question of environmental justice?
Yeah, I think when COVID hit, at least for Fridays for Future New York City, the whole organization kind of just shut down. A lot of the people who used to run it actually were seniors in high school. And so that they've gone and graduated and are going to college. So, I mean, part of the problem with the youth climate movement is that there is this constant influx of people in to the movement. So I think part of our job is making sure that our movement is sustainable and that we're educating the next generation so they will come and take our place when we need to go. And I think just in terms of the economy, at least for myself, I really understood the impact of globalization in a way that I had never understood it before, because we rely so heavily on connections to other countries and shipping and all of these kind of aspects of everyday life that we don't necessarily think about or we take for granted. And so I think for me, just sitting at home and reflecting on, okay, how can I make sure that when the world opens up and that we, start going back to semi-normal life, how can we make these systems more sustainable? How can we make sure that we are doing this in the most thoughtful way, where we're not wasting resources and we're not perpetuating climate change? So I think, it's a really complex problem. There are so many systems involved. It's an intersectional issue. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that people can come towards this issue and make actual change. And I think one of those is finding better ways of connecting people and goods around the world that do not use fossil fuels. Another aspect is legislation, making sure we have some sort of legislation in place that holds these big companies accountable and makes sure that they're actually becoming more green. But I agree. I think COVID has completely changed at least the way that I've seen the world and my lifestyle. I used to travel a lot, and I don't want to do that anymore because planes are, disastrous for the environment, and they emit so much carbon. So I think, really reflecting on what you can do in the world and in your community, especially. I think, in COVID, we all became more connected to the people around us in our community and started thinking of ways that we can give back to these people and to make it more, our world more sustainable and livable.
And Adrian, as you hear just the passion, the frustrations of this youngest generation, many of whom were inspired by Greta and her rhetoric, how do you feel about the next generation as they think and grapple with this and try to understand the impact they can have here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel deeply, for the stress and the anxiety that I'm witnessing and experiencing from all people, but young people in particular around the world, and feeling like they don't have a future. And it's why right now I'm focusing a lot on making sure that we take care of ourselves. We don't want people to burn out. We need you forever, for your whole entire life. So I remind people that self-care is earth care. When you take care, we are emergent beings from nature. We are nature. We got to take care of ourselves. And when we take care of ourselves, we're stronger. We make better sense of the world, and we can actually do this work for a lifetime. So don't stress so much that you burn out. And also you don't have to take the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's not just any one individual that's going to change the world. And there's a certain ego if we start to think that we have the answer and this is it. Then we give ourselves a break by sharing the load with each other and letting ourselves off the hook a little bit for having to save everything right here, right now. There's a lot of stress and anxiety in that urgency. And at the bottom line is 97% of scientists believe one thing. That's fine, but we still don't know what the future holds. And the future is still undetermined. We get to create it. We get to manifest it. And skiing, I don't know if you guys ever ski, but don't look at the trees, because that's where you're going to go. You're going to head right for the trees. So look to where you want to go.
And Adrian, you have this optimism. Where does it come from? What are the signs that have given you this optimistic outlook?
I've started to give my life force to other things than just myself and my ego and the things that, give me immediate relief, pleasure, escape. I'm a spiritual person. For me, it's about getting into nature and learning from nature, letting nature teach us about resilience. And resilience is about diversity. You have to have a humble learner's mind, trying to learn because this is a complex problem. And so we have to always be curious and learning new ways to adapt to it, as opposed to a one size fits all, authoritarian, prescriptive method.
What has been inspiring too, Anna and Jamie, has been your generation is out there in droves, record numbers. And I think When you look at just 3 years ago, Greta there protesting in front of the Swedish parliament, what makes you optimistic and hopeful in terms of the progress that's been made, and what can be done in the next 3 years?
I think over the past 3 years, we've seen an immense increase in just the public perception of the climate crisis. From when I first co-founded Zero Hour back in 2016, it was hardly a known thing that anyone was a climate activist. Now, it's a very mainstream topic that people are talking about more and more. And so I feel like in terms of the public conversation, in terms of changing minds, we've come a long way. Now it comes with actually impacting people, saving lives, because I think there is a level of privilege to be able to look at the climate crisis from a removed perspective and be like, we're all going to be okay, when a lot of people aren't. Like my friend had to evacuate her home and because of Hurricane Ida, in a place that was still reeling from Katrina. And I do agree that we have to go out and learn from nature. And really, this is about intergenerational action. I don't believe in pitting generations against each other. I don't believe in old people cause this because what about my abuela in Colombia? She grew up as a campesina living off the land, way less of a footprint, if we'll call it that, than I have. She didn't consider herself an activist at the time. That was just how she lived. That was just her culture. But she lived in a way that was much more harmonious with the earth than I'm living, just as someone living in the concrete jungle. So it's not as black and white as old versus young. I think we're all in this together, generation-wise as well.
And Anna, already there's a feeling of passing the torch, college, high school. Talk about what you think gives you hope here.
I mean, just seeing other climate activists and knowing that I'm in this fight together, that there are millions of other people who care about the climate crisis and who are willing to, put all of their energy and spirit into this problem is really inspiring. I think that, climate anxiety is definitely real. It's something that I think our generation suffers from, and it's really hard to get out of the mindset that, it really does feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, that you're the only one who can make any change. Because when you see older adults and global leaders not doing anything, you feel like you don't have a voice. And I think just remembering that other people are in the movement and that this fight doesn't just happen with you, it happens with communities, it happens with thousands and millions of people coming together and making their voices heard. I think that's, one of the greatest things from the last 3 years of strikes is just the publicity and making sure that we teach the world that climate crisis is a thing and that it needs to be taken seriously.
It's also important that we pressure our leaders, because right now, for example, Biden, with the stroke of a pen, could stop line 3. And there are so many Indigenous people on the front lines right now, putting their bodies on the line. The first step to getting out of a hole is to stop digging. So why are we still building new fossil fuel infrastructure that we cannot afford scientifically at all?
I think one of the reasons people get nervous is because they don't know where to start, where to focus their energies, what the priority is. Would love to hear from each of you in terms of what you think is the call to action that you've made a part of your life here as you fight climate change.
I mean, I think the biggest issue right now is holding global leaders accountable. So making sure that they are actually taking climate action. We need comprehensive climate legislation being passed in our government. We need actual physical change. We need rules to tell people you can't do this. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to kill the next generation. Because, at the end of the day, strikes are amazing. They help inspire people. They help get people energized and into the climate movement. But there is a sense of this is kind of performative, right? We strike, but then what happens next? What is the actual change that's going to come out of this strike? So I think actually working with our congresspeople and our senators and our global leaders and educating them on the climate crisis and making sure they take actual change and they put policies in place that ensure that the next generation has a right to a future and that future is livable is the most important thing that we can do at this point.
And Jamie, to just build off that.
I think I agree with everything that Anna said, and I also think that a great way to get involved for anyone who wants to take action is to get involved with any local divestment movement. Harvard just divested from fossil fuels. That movement has been going on for like a decade, and that's been a huge victory. At this point, fossil fuel investment from our government is blood on their hands because people are dying and environments are dying. And the fossil fuel industry has money everywhere, and we need to get it out because once we get their money out, we get their influence out.
Adrian, your last word on this complex subject.
For me, the most important thing, if you want to heal the environment, is to first start with self, the environment of yourself, your body. Get healthy, make sure you're strong and full of nutrition, eat right. Your brain needs all those micronutrients so that you can make better decisions. And you can have a sustained life in being part of the change. You know, I've been doing plastic work for a long time, and then I look around my house and there's all this plastic. So I haven't even done it for myself. So start there. And it's not about letting industry off the hook. It's just about walking the walk and making sure when you come to those companies, when you go to the government, you don't have the hypocrisy, but you're actually coming to them with the solution.
Well, thank you and all of you for just the kind of the wisdom and depth you brought to this conversation, both on the policy side as well as on the personal side, because it really expands those spheres. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.